The night was unnaturally still, and yet the air felt thick with tension. The flickering flames of the torches seemed to cast longer shadows than usual, as if the very earth itself was holding its breath. I stood on the edge of the gathering, heart racing, watching as Akin, the man we all knew as the greatest warrior of Oshogbo, was surrounded by the elders. But tonight, Akin wasn't the hero. Tonight, he was the man who had killed a child. I remember how the village had looked at him before that night, how men envied his strength, how women whispered in admiration of his wealth and power. Akin had risen from nothing. His father, Temi, had been a laughingstock, a man more interested in his flute and palm wine than in farming or providing for his family. Temi had died deep in debt, leaving behind a legacy of shame. But Akin had sworn never to be like his father. He became the exact opposite, hardworking, fierce, proud. He was a man who measured success by his bounds, his wives, his titles, and most importantly, by the absence of weakness. It was that very determination that made Akin a man feared by many. He had become one of the lords of the clan, his power undisputed. His barns overflowed with yams, the lifeblood of our people. He had taken 3 wives, each with many children. But more than his wealth or family, it was his strength in battle that truly defined him. He had been undefeated in wrestling matches, his powerful frame and unyielding spirit making him a legend among us. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, Akin had committed the greatest sin a man of Oshogbo could commit. He had killed a clansman, and not just any clansman, a boy, a child of our people. Even though it was an accident, there was no room for such mistakes in our culture. The punishment was clear. Akin would have to leave, banished from the land he had fought so hard to dominate. I was only a child then, but even I knew the gravity of the situation. The elders spoke in low, grave voices, their faces shadowed by the flames, discussing what must be done. The law of our ancestors was unyielding, and not even Akin, the great man of war, could escape it. The day had started like any other, bright, warm, filled with the sounds of village life. We had gathered to honor Izudu, the oldest man in Oshogbo, who had died peacefully in his sleep. It was a celebration of life, a grand funeral for a man who had lived well and long. The drums had beat in rhythm, the men had danced in honor, and the women had wailed in mourning. But no one expected what would happen next. In the midst of the dancing and the cries, Akin's gun exploded. A single shot, loud and terrifying, cut through the air, and when the smoke cleared, there was the boy Ojo's son, lying still on the ground, blood staining the earth beneath him. The village was frozen. I remember the way the crowd slowly parted, eyes wide in shock and horror. I could hear the whispers, see the disbelief on every face. How could this happen? How could Akin, the man known for his control and strength, have allowed such a terrible thing to occur? The elders acted quickly, as they always did in times of crisis. They gathered in the center of the village, their old faces lined with sorrow. It didn't matter that the killing had been an accident. The law was the law. Akin would have to leave, banished from Oshogbo for 7 long years. As I watched him standing there, surrounded by the flames and the accusing stares of the villagers, I wondered if this was truly the end for him. Could a man like Akin ever come back from something like this? Could he rebuild what he had lost? Even then, I doubted it. The next morning, Akin's family gathered their belongings and prepared to leave. I watched from a distance as his wives moved silently, their faces pale and expressionless, their children clinging to them in confusion. They didn't understand why they had to go, why their father, the great Akin, had been cast out. As they left the village, the drums were silent. No one spoke. The people of Oshogbo turned their backs, their faces dark with disappointment and shame. That was the day everything changed for Akin, and for all of us. Ojo's funeral had been one of the grandest I'd ever seen. The entire village had turned out to pay their respects to the man who had once been the voice of wisdom for our people. He had lived a long and prosperous life, filled with achievements, and had passed peacefully into the realm of our ancestors. It should have been a celebration of a life well lived. But instead, it became a day of tragedy. The sun had begun to set when the dancers entered the courtyard, their bodies moving in perfect rhythm to the beat of the drums. The warriors danced with spears in hand, their feet pounding the ground in a way that echoed deep into the evening air. The women wailed in mourning, their cries rising and falling in haunting waves. I watched in awe, as did the rest of the village, captivated by the beauty and the solemnity of the event. Akin stood at the edge of the gathering, as always, a towering figure of strength. He had come to honor Ojo, as all the warriors had, dressed in his finest garments and carrying his gun, a symbol of his power. The night was moving along as expected. The rituals followed to the letter, until, suddenly, everything changed.